and I know each other. We've met at one of the Toastmasters clubs back in the days. And so, like, I literally wanted my colleagues at the Google office at the time to experience that same type of activity without having to pull out extra time from their families. So, in other words, just try to bring it to the office. And I was empowered by the HR manager to do that. And when I started conducting these Toastmasters meetings, I gradually learned that I actually could gather some feedback on the sessions to improve them in the future. I could actually use some systems to schedule those sessions and track attendance and simplify logistics. And then I learned that there was some budget available that I could use for some snacks to make the evening brighter for the participants. And throughout these little steps, I then brought it all together, and it came as a full puzzle, as a G2G program that was enabling me to deliver my experience, share my knowledge with my peers. And this is how it works, really. It's not about like some HR person approaching employees and imposing the need of getting trained or training someone on them. It's not about the learning and development professionals developing comprehensive trainings and then scaling those trainings to the whole organization. It's more about the HR persons creating the environments in which people feel empowered and encouraged to do something extra on top of their core role, and the learning and development individuals focusing mostly on developing trainings that teach people how to be effective facilitators, effective speakers, effective moderators, basically every aspect of training delivery. And then once people kind of get interested in those categories and develop those skills, it just makes it natural for them to come and deliver some training, right? Mm-hmm. I said that I really simplified the whole concept. So of course, like HR and learning and development managers at Google don't do just that. They have many more responsibilities. But I was trying to illustrate that these specialists, they focus on creating the foundation, right? Mm-hmm. It's not their job to motivate people. It's not their job.
Top-down approach, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So basically, the idea I have is that if, say, an HR person or an upper management executive or a learning and development specialist within the organization wakes up with a question or a challenge that they must teach their employees something, or even worse, they must make or motivate their employees to learn something, or even worse than that, they must encourage their people to learn how to learn something, then it's probably too late, right? Okay. So instead, they should be proactively focusing on putting all the tools, creating the proper environments, building the proper culture that will naturally enable people, empower people, and make them willing to come and share and learn and teach and grow and develop together.
So it works more like a community where HR and L&D professionals provide a platform and provide a safe and brave space for everyone to participate in. At the same time, all peers work as a community. When you work as a community, you're a lot more empowered. You don't have, top-down approach. It's more of a grassroots approach. But then the question is, how would you make sure as a company that whatever your employees are learning, it's related to business needs in a way that how do you manage this skill, like what's it called, gap analysis, whatever. For sure, it's really nice. I'm being devil's advocate right now, right? Because I understand that for sure, whatever you learn, it definitely helps the company, but how do we make sure that it doesn't kind of deviate too much for the personal needs?
Well, I will answer your question. Don't quote me on that. It's my personal view, my personal experience. But the simple answer to this question is that we don't.
Okay.
We don't. Like, I mean, literally, anyone, any employee can go to the corporate learning platform and create a session, create a learning session, and it becomes instantly available to everyone, to 120,000 full-time employees, the latest I've known of, probably even more than that now. And personally, I have delivered trainings on topics ranging from artificial intelligence to bias busting to some hard skills related to sales to how to pick skiing and snowboarding equipment.
Okay.
And like nobody micromanaged me. Nobody really told me that I shouldn't talk about ski and snowboarding equipment purchasing, or that I should do more artificial intelligence trainings. It was up to me, and this is probably one of the key drivers that I decide what expertise and experience I have and want to share, and it's up to others to decide if they want to come and listen to what I have to tell. And because it's this peer-to-peer community, as you rightfully noted, people who come to learn do not feel obligated to sit and listen. At the same time, I feel responsible for delivering quality material because I am the initiator, I am the owner. And it's in my best interest that I come across the way I want with the topic that I'm passionate about. So if I'm passionate about public speaking and I come to you mumbling about how to create a stellar presentation, probably I'm not creating the best image for public speaking methodologies that I preach. Right? So practice what you preach is one of the mottos that I would go by in that case.
Thank you. What is the role of coaching then in Google? Where do you use coaching? Who uses coaching? And how do you become coach at Google? Many questions, but
yeah. Well, let me share my personal journey with you, and I'll let you and the audience decide on how to formulate the answer to the question. So for me, coaching and training facilitation at Google comes on top of my core role. And while at times it may be directly benefiting my core role, it obviously requires some extra time, some extra effort, energy, resources, knowledge that I would need otherwise, right? So I live by the notion that actually two notions. First notion is that I learn more about the topic and I understand the topic better by teaching that topic to others, and that's what motivates me to participate in the G2G program as a trainer, as a facilitator. And second notion is that if I benefit from something, I want to give back. Okay. So I remember that at early stages of my career at Google, I was lucky to get an opportunity to work with a coach, a mentor. Like it probably was something in between at the time, And that help came very timely because I was kind of losing sight of where I was going with my career. I was on the edge between, like just doing the core job and meeting the expectations versus shooting for promotion. So I really needed some guidance. And the coach I worked with helped me tremendously. He helped me to reframe what I was doing as part of my core role and how I was approaching my job, and eventually that led to promotion. So at the back of my mind, I registered that coaching was good, it was helpful, and if I ever have an opportunity to pay back by helping others in the same manner, I probably would. Time has passed, probably 2-3 years, and I have been exposed to the career advice tool on LinkedIn. One day, just a pop-up came on my screen saying, "Hey Max, like there are some people looking for some career advice. Do you want to help them out?" And I said, "Well, sure, why not? Right? I am helper by nature. So if a person reaches out to me for help, like I very very rarely refuse, and I must have like some very very strong reason to do that. So generally, I try to help at least by connecting the person to somebody who has expertise within the subject matter, or by pointing them to the right resource." So long story short, I started contributing to that LinkedIn career advice, and I probably talked to a couple dozens of individuals. At some point, I came to realize that while I was willing to help those individuals deeper, I was experiencing some blocks. Like I could only share my own experience, but that experience may not come relevant to the individuals because it was my experience based on my values, based on my circumstances, based on my resources. And sometimes there was a magic match. I was saying something and it was spot on for the person. But in other cases, it was just like, not quite. And I felt a bit sorry about not being able to help to that individual more. So I started thinking, okay, how could I do that? I apologize, folks. I am typing occasionally because my screen goes dark. I need to re-enter the password. I probably should take this as a lesson for the next and change the display settings. And anyways, back to the story. I started exploring what I could do in order to uh, drive more value to the conversations that I have been having on LinkedIn. And naturally, I just came across this topic of coaching. And I thought, let me just go to the learning portal at Google and see if somebody could tell me anything about coaching. So I went to the portal and I magically discovered a completely separate substream within the G2G program, which is called the Guru program, which is essentially the coaching practice, the corporate coaching practice. And I was blown away because on that site, there were so many materials. There was like a coaching framework. There was, like a whole set of guidelines on the core principles of coaching. I quickly discovered that I could get involved with some experienced coaches myself, so clearly benefiting from it. And I also learned that even without having a formal coaching education, depending on the circumstances, after meeting some basic criteria, I could start contributing to the coaching practice here and now. And I was like, wow, like I definitely want to do that because in doing so, I will increase my coaching abilities and will be able to help out people both inside Google as well as externally. So I got involved with the corporate coaching program. I went through the basic qualification stages, got approval from my manager to contribute some of my working time as a coach. It's called a 20% project. Some of the people in the audience may be familiar with this concept. Google is famous for it. On practice, really, it becomes a 120% project, right? Because I can't speak for everyone else, but for me, like I still continue doing my core job to 100% of my capacity, and anything extra comes on top of that. But regardless, I qualified as a coach and passed through the basic coaching onboarding training, started having some sessions. And then quickly it became apparent that while some of the coaching conversations were quite shallow and I could get away with some basic coaching frameworks and tools, other conversations were much, much deeper, and they involved deeper emotional connection. The problems were much tougher, and I just wasn't comfortable handling those situations. So naturally, I came to the conclusion that I had to learn more. And having thought of it, I came with an idea that if I learned more about some common coaching methodologies and tools, I could not only contribute at a new level to the coaching practice externally and internally, but I could also complement some of my core job, because as a sales manager, as a partner manager, at some point I have to lead without authority. And coaching just provides a natural way to do that through asking powerful questions, through deep listening, through building rapport, through empathy. All these are fundamental coaching principles. So again, I tapped into a G2G network, asked people who were long-time contributors to the coaching practice whether they could recommend any particular coaching program, and they came up with a program that happened to be the right fit in terms of the depth, the cost, the duration. I completed that program, got qualified as a professional coach, and kept on contributing to the coaching practice.
Would you recommend it to the audience? Would you like to disclose the name of the program?
Yeah, sure, I can share that. The school that I went to is called Ericsson International. I mean, it was a personal choice based on a positive feedback. There are many other programs. Coactive coaching model is also powerful, and I've been exposed to that in some subsequent trainings that were delivered to me at Google. There are other schools, there are universities who offer like masters and PhDs in coaching, believe it or not, right? Yeah, so for me, it was like just finding a balance between the duration of the program, the depth. I clearly didn't want to become a professor of coaching and spend 5 years of my life writing some fundamental work on this topic, but at the same time, I didn't need something quick and snappy because I've already had that level of exposure at Google. So I was looking for something in between, and Ericsson just happened to offer a flexible online-based program that just ticked all the boxes.
From what I know, it's more like online program, as well as you have several calls with a coach. So it's a lot of, online and more at the same time, you actually get to talk to people, work with peer groups. So I've heard great things about that. Not that they're promoting any of that, but there were a couple of questions from the audience that I see now. So that's definitely one of the most famous ones. And you mentioned that, you know, you had a coach at Google. And the question from the audience is, what kind of programs and what kind of, and I know you mentioned that you know, not really big, Google is not really big at programs per se, but how do you work with new managers? What are the best practices for new managers, for training like brand new managers that never had any management experience? Is it also part of G2G, or are there anything beyond that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So again, I may not be the best person to answer this question because I'm not part of the HR function. My new employee onboarding experience is limited to those few onboardings that I've done within my team. None of those involved onboarding any new managers. Anecdotally, I know that there are some focused trainings for managers, not only new managers, but experienced managers and senior managers. And Google invests a lot of time and effort and attention to making sure that managers stay up to speed with their managerial skill sets and qualities. Again, at the rework site, audience could probably learn much more about the managerial practices at Google. I may need to clarify that while G2G program is large, vast, and encompassing, and it covers like so many areas, some of which may be even tapping into the HR topics. On top of that, of course, there is a formal onboarding process that is handled by the HR. There are some formal trainings that individuals need to go through depending on their function. There are some mandatory trainings that all the employee go through and then repeat throughout their tenure at the company. So an example of such trainings would be unconscious bias, of which you can again learn at the rework site. And if you Google unconscious bias or go to YouTube and look it up, you will get some materials which I would highly recommend.
Really?
So clearly, like it's a synergy of volunteer, community-driven effort, some formal processes, and the inclusive and empowering environment that creates the full learning and development experience at Google.
Sounds like a very easy formula, but very difficult to replicate, isn't it?
I can't wait to see the recording of this video so that I could take notes of my own sayings. Most of these I'm kind of thinking on my feet and wouldn't be able to
it's quite interesting to hear from. I think it's more interesting to hear from a person who doesn't have this formal HR and L&D, because you really speak for a company, or more for, you know, the best version of the company. You speak from your experience as an employee, which is a really nice combination of that.
Well, one other thing that may be interesting to the audience, even though indirectly related to the previous question, is that to my view, the best HR persons when it comes to learning and development are invisible HR persons. So in my 5.5 tenure at Google, I probably could count with my fingers how many times I actually interacted with HR. And in most of those cases, it was either me like being proactive with some initiative that I just wanted to scale and needed to request some additional resource, or me and the HR personnel collaborating on some larger initiative that aside from everything else involved. some trainings, and I just happened to be the person who was deeply involved in the G2G program, right? But it was never imposed on me. It was never demanded of me or anyone else. That's we kind of contribute to this to this program. It does make sense from the broader career development perspective, though, because if you think about it, as people grow up the career ladder, the requirements that they need to meet and the skills that they need to demonstrate become deeper and broader and sometimes harder to be demonstrated within the core role. So think of a individual contributor, specialist in some technical role, who may want to become a people manager eventually, and they need to grow into that role naturally by demonstrating that they can handle large audiences, that they can coach individuals, that they can lead groups, that they can give and receive feedback, that they can do like so many things. But they are a computer programmer. They spend most of their day just by writing code on the computer. So how would they possibly demonstrate all those skills? And this learning and development program, it creates the foundation for people to do something extra and develop and demonstrate extra skills. It creates this this foundation that empowers people to grow.
So it's more coming from a person. It's not the manager saying, okay, you could be potentially in line for a manager role, and then you need to go through this leadership program for 6 months, and then you're going to get this role. It's more coming from the person who even, test if they want to be there. Yeah.
Well, it probably may differ from team to team, from manager to manager, from person to person, but in general, I would say at Google we avoid micromanagement, and most, if not all, the individuals are self-motivated and responsible enough to take charge of their own personal and professional growth and development.
But how does it? Sorry.
No, I was going to say that more often than not, what I might hear from my manager is, upon sharing some exciting training I've gone through or experience that I had in the past, her saying, "Oh my gosh, like this is amazing. Would you be so kind to share this with the team? Would you be able to teach us how to do this?" And then I say, "Yeah, sure, why not?"
Okay, interesting. But how does it work then in terms of career path? Are there clear career path at Google, or do you have a sort of blueprint? Any specific that there is a question also from the audience related to that. How do you communicate and design career letters at Google? And any specific approach you have to show the career path to employees?
Again, I'm not the right person to be asked this question because, as I said, and I keep on repeating, I'm not part of HR function. I know very little about career path design. The general notion Google lives by is that each individual has to take charge of their careers. Right? All the individuals are encouraged to develop a personal development plan or career development plan and have open conversations with the respective managers about the career aspirations, which opens the doors for more practical conversations, such as, I am here and I want to become X. How do I get there? What skills do I need? How do I acquire those skills? Or how do I demonstrate that I am already proficient in those skills? And more often than not, the answer to those questions comes in the form of attending a training, or delivering a training, or maybe coaching, mentoring somebody, or otherwise contributing to the broader culture and many programs that it incorporates.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of what you're looking for when maybe someone from our audience want to eventually work at Google, what are you looking for in terms of profiles of people to actually see that they have this growth mindset needed to be able to own this own development? What kind of things that you find as a priority? And I know you're not part of the HR, so you wouldn't repeat yourself, but are there any particular things that that you can see from a person?
Well, again, this is a very comprehensive question because it involves like more objective criteria and more structured processes, as well as some subjective criteria that may be relevant to me as a person, but may not be relevant to the hiring manager of a team next door. Right?
Yeah.
What I can say though, and sorry, I apologize to the audience and specifically the person who asked this question if my answer appears to be somewhat vague. But what I can say is that the first thing that struck me when I started working at Google, and actually even before I started working, while I was going through my interviews, was how awesome the people were. And I don't mean awesome in terms of, like their supernatural looks or abilities or whatever, but I mean they're human, basic human qualities. The way they empathize, the way they listen, the way they consider needs of others, the way they accommodate the needs of others and put the needs of others ahead of those of themselves. On top of that, of course, many colleagues that I've had the pleasure of working with or crossing paths with are just exceptional individuals. They are self-motivated. They are high achievers in different aspects, right? So it doesn't only relate to work. Some of them are great sportsmen. Others are stellar parents. Third, great writers, right? But anything they do, they put passion to that. They do things proactively. They think of their personal growth proactively. They probably give more than they take. And I think these are some of the basic criteria that those colleagues that I've been exposed to share in common. Right? Of course, depending on the role, depending on the market, depending on the product area, there may be different qualifications, skills, experiences that may be needed. But in essence,
mindset, very interesting. To really strive to be not be the best, but to really finish what you started, to really go for it.
Not even that. Sorry if I didn't put the message across the way I wanted it. Like, be human, be kind, be empathetic, be inclusive, be open-minded, be respectful, be supportive, be friendly. Basically, like, be a human being, right?
A good human being.
Yes.
Do you think it comes from founders, or how much of founders actually play a role in shaping the culture when the company is so huge at this stage? Maybe in the beginning, but what?
So unfortunately, I wasn't there where at the time when founders Sergey and Larry were readily accessible to every of the 20 employees in the office, and I can't attest from the first-hand experience like what kind of um, culture code or values they as individuals transmitted. But clearly they set the foundation that lasts to this day, years after they stepped out from the business. So as some of you may know, Sergey and Larry are still members of the board, but they gave reins of Google to Sundar Pichai, the CEO, and there are other companies that are part of the Alphabet Holdings alongside with Google. So clearly, they've done a great job setting the foundation, but it was not tied to them.
Yeah.
So things didn't break with their departure. And that probably tells us that they did something right from the very beginning that lasts for you.
Absolutely. Very, very interesting. And we have a question there, and I guess I already know the answer to that. It's more, how do you manage and engage and motivate individual contributors to learn and participate in trainings? Oh no, this one was already asked. Sorry, there were questions coming through at the same time.
Well, while looking up the question, I can answer this one very simply.
Yeah.
Like you don't motivate them. You create the opportunity, because again, by the time a person wants to learn something or teach something, they need to have the environment, the tools, the community to support their urge, right? So it is in your best interest and ability as managers, HR specialists, learning and development specialists, to create and nourish such environments, put the tools and platforms out there that would enable this self-service, so that the person who wants to learn or wants to teach can do that. They are able to do that. And that is speaking of motivation, the best motivation is praise from the peers, right? So if I come and share something that I'm naturally passionate about, and other people develop this same passion, whether it's work related and hard skill related, or something outside of work, and we can have deeper conversations on this topic that I'm passionate about, it benefits me, right? It also goes without saying, as I mentioned, that at certain level of the career progression, there are certain requirements that can be achieved through this learning, right? Whether it's coaching skill or leading the group, or getting some quality feedback in and out. All these areas are covered within the learning and development space, and it just naturally develops the corporate talent.
And it's mentioned before, coming back to the motivation question, and the question that I was looking for: what if people don't take ownership? What if there is resistance in development? How do you cope? I would imagine that this kind of people would not even, reach to work at Google. But what if it happens?
let me answer this, and I'm not going to go into the technicalities or troubleshooting mode, because there may be many different circumstances that have contributed to such attitude from the personnel, right? But I have an opinion on why Google approaches this learning and development, like talent development topic, the way it does. So, having spent a lot of time, resources, energy, money on hiring the best talents in the world, the company expects to benefit from bringing that talent on board. There is an obvious way how it benefits by the hired individual conducting the job for which they've been hired. Right? But the question is, how do you maximize that contribution? And you maximize that contribution by getting those most talented, most brilliant, the brightest people to share the knowledge, the experiences, the values with others. So from the corporate standpoint, it just comes down to a question of maximizing the impact. Mm-hmm. From the individual standpoint, again, once the systems and platforms and communities and corporate culture are there and they are such that they empower people to learn and teach, right? I might say lead by example. You know, like if you are a CEO or if you are an HR manager, just throw a training on beekeeping or gardening or, you know, like something else, not work related. Just show them that people can do that. Mm-hmm. Start low. Try to encourage people to just make fun out of it, right? Like learning, like create a standing agenda item, lunch and learn. Anyone who wants to talk about anything or wants to teach anything just pops their session in a schedule or just signs up and comes at a certain date and time, right? And once people get accustomed to it, build on top of that. See who contributes the most. Maybe they have some personal calling for it. Maybe they are achieving some personal goals that they're hoping to get out of this experience. Talk to them one to one. Ask like what's driving them. Empower them to lead the way, and others will just join the bandwagon.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. It's more of a culture of freedom, so to say, at the same time, a lot of empowerment. And as a lot of people say, you know, it's very, very difficult to get hired into Google, but very, very difficult to also be fired because you already have, I read in the book also, for those who joined a bit later, that's the book I'm talking about Google culture. Some interviews, some positions have up to 12, 11 interviews or so. So
well, I had 8.
8, okay. So like you take so much time, you spend so much time, and I can't even remember specific numbers in terms of comparing Google to other companies, how much of a budget of HR is spent on hiring, but compared to on average, it's like crazy amount of money. It's so much more than the average company spends. But, you know, it comes down to that it's also difficult for people to leave, and they don't want to leave because of the environment, and they're in the perfect puzzle of this company. Very, very interesting. And the question that I have from the audience is about teams. Mm-hmm. I can imagine some teams function better than others, as large Google is today. What happens to teams that spiral downwards culture-wise?
So I will defer this question to the Reward website, because there was like a fundamental study conducted at some point that basically did the research of what makes the highest performing teams tick. Mm-hmm. And there were some particular qualities derived from it, from this study, that basically answered the question. I don't remember the details on the top of my head, so in order not to mislead the person who asked this question and others, just go to the website and search for like highly effective people or teams, sorry, or just by the keyword teams. I'm pretty sure that's something.
Famous study. Yeah. Brilliant.
What that I can add to that though is that one of the key criteria for high performing teams was psychological safety.
Mm-hmm.
So when people can come and talk freely and discuss challenges, issues, be vulnerable, give and receive open, actionable feedback, then they perform to their best capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in the individual managers' reach to start creating such environment today.
Yeah. I mean, psychological safety, I think it's one of the most important things that people talk about now, especially when it comes to COVID-19, because it's very difficult to create psychological safety inside. And unfortunately, sometimes marginalized groups at the moment are more affected by COVID-19, because not everyone has this environment at home to create a psychological safety. The steps towards that, if you're the company that it's not that it was no foundation when you just founded the company, and to create psychological safety when you know already maybe 100 people, 150 people, the steps to create it are very difficult. It takes time. It takes a lot of looking inside of yourself. And as a company, sometimes it's not very pretty. When you look inside of yourself, when you look into the systems that you have in place, when you look at the relationships, it's not going to be very pretty. But the question, to make it relevant also for our audience, and I'm not asking you to give magic formula to all of the participants here, but if you are not Google, if you're a much smaller company based in Berlin, what in your understanding, and obviously you can't answer this question in one sentence, but in your understanding, what could be one fundamental thing to start taking the first step towards building this inclusive culture of psychological safety when you're not there, when something went wrong, or when you never even thought about it before, and now something is happening that it's not in the direction where you want to go? What will be the first step to create psychological safety, or on the way to create psychological safety?
Yeah. Well, I reckon the challenge is broad, and the solution is more comprehensive than one can imagine. Answering it shortly, I would say that in terms of psychological safety and transparency, the upper management could start creating this open, transparent environment by just speaking up more freely what's on top of their mind, sharing their emotions, asking for feedback, not from their immediate leadership teams and immediate subordinates, but across the company. On the diversity inclusiveness side, it's even like deeper and more complicated in terms of understanding the scope of the challenges, as well as the breadth of solutions and workarounds that are already available. What I might say is that it may be worth formulating why it is important for the organization, and by organization I mean the team of people. Why the team should care about creating this diverse, inclusive, safe environment for themselves first and foremost, right? And then upon that foundation, just creating space for people to learn about these subject matters and educate themselves. So I'll give you an example. This year, following the very tragic events in the United States that gave way to the Black Lives Matter, Google created this learning environment by basically encouraging people to set aside like 1 day to learn about the Juneteenth, the uh, problematics of like racial discrimination, the familiarize with the vocabulary, participate in some safe space discussions with individuals who are also passionate about these topics and more importantly in the know about the challenges that marginalized communities may face. And that was really helpful because I found myself learning so much in just 1 day because I was told across the board by my manager, by my CEO, by my peers that like it is important. This is why it is important, and like we give you all the resources, the time, the learning materials, the forums where you can discuss safely and ask questions, etc. And it just made wonders.
It's remarkable the way even Google just gave you 1 day to really dedicate to that. It's not the way saying, okay, here are the resources, you know, on top of your work, on top of your family, on top of whatever, you know, learn about that. But having this specific day, it really makes a difference.
Yeah, one thing that I may want to highlight is that to me, learning is not an obligation. And put very simple, I think at least one argument why every person, every working person or every living person must think about learning as a beneficial activity to them personally, first and foremost, is that it increases their market value, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I learn something today, I become a better version of myself tomorrow, and I can market myself better. Like this is a very pragmatic way of putting it. This is not what drives me and many individuals that I know, but this is one of the aspects. And at the very least, if the person just doesn't care about anything, they don't want to share knowledge, they don't want to help others, they don't want anything, but all they care is their own well-being, they should think of this. I learn, I become worth more money on the market. And then the next kind of phase of that learning cycle is that they realize, oh, and if I teach, I learn even more,
Exactly.
and then I become worth even more. So it creates this vicious circle. They learn, they teach to learn more, to, you know,
yeah, keep going. I think it's even more if you don't learn, you not even that you stagnate, you depreciate in value. Because
that's
knowledge.
That's an interesting perspective. Yeah, and I want to apologize to the audience if some of the things that I say may sound idealistic, but this is the way they are, and I think it's just the matter of fact that once you give people abundance of resources, environment, support, this like safe environments to do things, doesn't matter, to teach, to learn, to help, whatever, people will naturally come. Some will come earlier, some later. Some will do more, some will do less. Some will give, others will take. But it doesn't matter. Like it just creates this cycle. Motion creates emotion, right? And people will get involved one way or the other, and this is exactly what we want. This is how the community is built and how it strives.
Absolutely. And the most popular question for today, and I left it until the end for a reason, because I was waiting for the right moment. I think it's a great moment. So anonymous person, you've been waiting for a long time. your time is now, so sorry for waiting. But relating to what you talked about, learning and personal growth, the question is, I noticed that the first thing that people ditch when they're busy is time to invest in themselves in their personal growth. Tips from you, Max. How do you deal with that? Do you recognize this yourself when you're very, very busy and there is everything at the same time and there is just no time to invest in personal growth?
Mm-hmm.
Don't
Well,
tell me you always have time to invest in personal growth.
I wish I had 48 hours in a day. But may level with you, you Ola, and you, the collective audience. Personally, I just get so irritated when anyone tells me that they don't have time. Like it just, I don't know how to describe it, but it gives me like this inner burn. I'm like, how you don't have time? Like, come on, like.
And your antennas go.
Yeah, I mean, like I always like to think about it in a how to say, like comparable terms. So Ola, I, and Elon Musk have exactly the same time at hand. We all have 24 hours and 7 days a week and 52 weeks and limited number of years in our life, right? Ola does this great initiative with BerLearn and lets you folks in the audience gain some knowledge and expertise from some people from all over the globe who are willing to share through these webinars. Elon Musk does greater than that. Launches spaceships. He builds cars that the whole world is fascinated about. And what do? I just sit on the couch and slack all day long, and I have no time to learn. See where I'm going with that? Like it's all relative. So what is no time for one person? It's just a matter of planning and prioritization for the other person. To answer this question, I might recommend a few practical tips. The first tip is to read a book by Stephen Covey. It's called First Things First. As the outcome from reading this book, every person should understand what are the roles that they play in their life and what are the goals they pursue within each of those roles. And once that becomes clear, it will allow the person to guide them through the tasks and competing priorities throughout their day. Okay, so that's one. That's how you like prioritize one thing versus the other. Learning versus watching a TV. Learning versus, I don't know, going to a pub. Learning versus spending time with your family. Which one is more important, right? Or maybe you want to learn about how to spend quality time with your family, or how to be a better parent, right? It also involves learning. Second is this concept of golden hour. I have adopted this concept myself about a year and a half ago. And the way it works is very simple. You wake up ideally earlier than you normally would. And it's a totally separate topic on like sleep cycles, etc. But you make time in the morning, and the first thing you do, you dedicate this time to learning. You have to decide up front, ahead of time, what you want to learn, like what exactly you want to do, and the understanding of the goals and priorities from the first tip will help you to inform your decision, what you want to learn and why you want to learn it and what it will give you, right? But The point is that you will know that you want to learn, and you create this time. When you're fresh, when you have the full day ahead, first thing you do, you invest in yourself. Think about it as an investment, right? Again, to this pragmatic example that I gave earlier, like you want to sell yourself for more. And the way you do that is by increasing your market worth, market value. And one simple way you can do that is through learning. Then probably the next stage of this process is to develop a system that will enable you to learn effectively. And for that, I may recommend to Google learning styles. One of the very first links that comes up on Google search is just a great site. I don't remember what its name is, but it's like literally one of the first few links. You go in there and you learn about your learning style. And that will help you to become efficient in learning, retain more information, make it more meaningful to you, depending on whether you are auditory learner or visual learner or vocal learner or physical learner. There are 7 styles, I think. So go do that. First Things First by Stephen Covey, Golden Hour and Learning Styles. That's
lovely. I really love this practical approach. Brilliant, brilliant, Max. Really, really cool stuff. Good. So I would say that we could recap with a very, very brilliant conversation with you, Max. It's really lovely to reconnect in professional environment now, which is really funny. So I would say first thing first, do go to Google website, the one that's rework, lots of very, very helpful, very useful tips about anything coming from culture. If you would like to learn more about unconscious bias, really brilliant presentation there, facilitators guides. I actually used it myself yesterday, so really cool that you mentioned it today. Read this book, very, very hands-on, really insightful, really great tips, and very inspirational at the same time. And don't forget First Thing First by Stephen Covey. Make sure you have this golden hour and think of yourself as investment. And don't never say that I never have time for learning, because it's always a time of priorities. It's always time of question. And when it comes to learning and developing your own company, create this freedom. Don't roll out programs, but create this psychological safety, psychological safe space for everyone, and then all the things will thrive. Thank you so much, Max, for your very insightful hints, very insightful experience as well. Thank you for the audience for your questions. It was really, really good.
Well, thank you for having me, Ola. Thank you, BerLearn, for this great initiative. Keep on doing what you do. It brings value to many, many people. And thank you, everyone who was able to connect and stayed up all the way to the very end. I really appreciate your time. I hope that it was useful, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have any follow-up questions, I will be happy to address those individually. And I wish you all the best in your efforts of establishing the fruitful and empowering learning and development environment that will enable your employees and yourselves to thrive and grow both personally and professionally.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. And don't forget, if you're in Berlin, make sure to come to BerLearn picnic in the park. Good night, everyone.